So, welcome everybody to session. This is session 5E, Cinematic Transcodification Part 3. I am Mattia Petricola. I am a postdoc researcher at the University of L'Aquila, and I am one of the organizers of this conference. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm happy to be sharing this session. So without further ado, I will leave the floor to our first speaker, who is Silvia Barbotto. Silvia is a postdoc research fellow for an ERC project called Facets, and in Mexico, and she got her PhD in art in Spain and graduated in communication from the University of Turin. She is an artist and a yogini, and her practices join academic semiotic research and aesthetic experimental practices in collaborations with universities, institutions, multimedia decolonial labs, pop-up groups, and pop-up groups. Few articles, various expositions, one book which is called Bitácora, and another project which is called Sensi Inversi, which is inverted senses in English, is in process. Some of her works have been presented in Mexico, USA, Latin America, Europe, and India, and her presentation today is entitled Transcodification of Face, Literature, Arts, Media. I would remind everybody before we get going that your allotted time is 20 minutes, and since there are 4 speakers, in order to leave a few minutes for Q&A, I would ask you to please stick to your minutes as strictly as possible. Silvia, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Matthias, and thank you very much to the all organizer. Can you see my presentation and myself?
Yes, we can see both yourself and your presentation. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So I will start immediately with reading some part of my work that is about the face. So the face as an instance par excellence that leads to the content, the reformulation of its expressive and epistemic form. So face requires a continual reinterpretation and codification, both in its own construction and deconstruction, as well as the perception and interpretation of otherness. So whatever iconic and indicative or symbolic, the face is a favorable terrain for thinking about an inhibiting and hybrid of thus transcoding, which is also in some way transdisciplinary. Art is a modeling system conducive to this purpose. So thanks to a textual semiotic approach, we will see how processes of signification are nourished and sedimented through the use of various media and techniques. So I try in this short presentation, join this background about face to share a few ideas about Facets, that is the group of research I'm part of, and we'll join theoretical aspect or some also practical and didactical experiencing, especially with my teaching of semiotic of the space in University of Mexico, Yucatan, as the video that is accompanying us in the first part. So our own face transformed, watch over, retracted in a series of continuous transformation and interpretation in the apparently dichotomous medium between the natural and artificial. In the transmedial passage of a physiognomy and morphology that has a long history and synergy with new technologies. It is again nowadays a discipline that represents a flourished tool for human understanding, in the specificity for the interpretation of human body signs. Actually, with the proliferation of body surveillance or face detector, the identification individuals can be immediately clipped in details by no human agency, programmed by informatic experts, This reflection brings us to experimental point of view that try to go behind the face, but also across it, in an intersubjective neurophysical way in parallel with an historical narrative, intimate one. Semiotic and its cultural approach teach us to consider the density inside the semiosphere, the frontiers between them, and the existence of pertinence to contextualize it, to translate, to pass between a framework to another one, to decode, but also to code, to pass among the frontiers, suggests a conditioning of a new background. As we adapt our face to a decodification for external subjects, we can also consider the same technology moving the translation of signification towards ourselves. In this transitority, data embracing this sort of virtual conglomerate are able to show evidence about our character that even our own body doesn't discern, but they could. In a semi-transparent cultural practice, this paper proposed to construct an effective dimension starting from the physical magnitude. So as we are seeing here, like practicing experiment implicated the use of the embodiment, the masks, and something that I call the laboratory of stain, but also the transdiscipline. So as the manifesto of transdiscipline says, the complexity is from the explosion to the investigation of disciplines, and in the same time, the complexity determines the acceleration and the multiplication of the disciplines. So it's something more, something else. In a continual relation between ownness and otherness, there is a translation of languages, as well as the translating intentionality of otherness, the intrinsic textual and narrative disposition to find oneself as the subject of reading oneself and others. Quoting Massimo Leone, he said, not only the bodies of the others, but also one's own body is the source of a quotidian experience of otherness. So we follow with some experiment to thinking about the faith that is our use of today and of my work, but connect with many media, many way of approaching it. So following a little bit, we did also in this atelier, in this laboratory, some automatic writing and surrealistic methodology to assess access to the potential of writing. We reflect on a few words at trajectory, perspective, and of course, body, face, and mask. And here I will read a part of two examples, and if we will have more time, maybe we can read a little more. So one, he says, when I look in the mirror, I notice that my body had marks on it. I question myself. So you see the key point, the key words on the screen. And the title is Transversality. The question was, where to go if space is not important? Where does the journey from my size to the marks take me? I was up against the wall, there was no escape, but I found the light at the end, my brain clicked, my perspective went in, and I could realize that I had in front of me all this time. I saw my face. And I didn't exist. I saw her and I lived in her. I walked through the door and across the threshold until I come to this new place. In the clouds that say my head lies, but I do not see it. Yet I know that there are traces of impossible frequencies that generated thunders and invisible sounds. Every experience seems like a dream, a series of senseless sense that's left me perplexed by ambiguity. Then I jumped and felt the water, the fire, the air, the sky, and I had no face. I was only glass of water drunk by God, the God with the dark mask. Then this God showed me what was my starting point. A tree with golden leaves, whose roots formed the cradle of my rest, and the one that will be my last and will be eternal. One more, maybe later we can read. So also thinking about this binary codification, eventually in this experience, this transition of time, how we work with media, how we work with our own codification and with otherness, no, and how we somehow understand that this is the same. So more and more work about mask, about the face, about the connection with this nature culture that is not a dichotomy, but there is a way to approach the cultural part. So as also thinking about this binary codification, more digital, in a more schematic and geometric and mathematic codes, where is the transitority between this code? Here we see different example about all this way of detecting face, of creating new face from algorithm, from programmation, all it means all use quite important to get in consideration. Here we have a work of Manu Luksch on the in the black and white screen, and we see that art and AI, that means the artificial intelligence, work a lot together in many ways, adopting new technology and integrating them to practices and artifacts, critics pushing recreated the boundary of normalized practice and artifacts, or playing with the peripheric zone as well as the nucleus of apparent dichotomy. That means naturality, artificiality. And in artificial intelligence is often used in art for example, techniques to illustrate, decorate, enhance human-machine interaction, or as an epistemological and pragmatic paradigm in making to be question always. Artificial automatization versus, for example, human automatization. So we can also come back again and learn from what we are teaching to the machine, and how this teaching, this called deep learning, deep teaching, is coming back to us. So which are our automatisms? Or AI can use in art for a set of practices aimed at integrating ontology by semiotizing it with the new artifacts and strategies. At the beginning, it was just a dialogue with the digitality, but now is a dialogue not only with this pixel and this new form of transmit images and languages, but also with virtual matter, virtual new matter. So, for example, by biometric surveillance apparatus, we will teach many things, and we saw as art at the beginning was immediately in the first action with trying to problematize these aspects. For example, biometrics are those that are on the surface, the facial iris, fingerprint, can be measured from a high resolution image with an algorithm that compares physical details. For example, that getting closer to the digital identity, art of the body interacting with the intelligence artificial, we immediately think about tracking movement, tracking physical movement of the person's bodies. And in the case of the face specificity, we can think in eye tracking, very common right now. So not only tracking, but also lately, this tracking is interpreted as a displacement. As in the self-portrait that we are seeing is a very nice work by Joachim Sauter, Zerzesch, And it was developed in response to this and aimed to introduce the computer as an artistic medium in its own right and propagate one of its most notable property, that is the interactivity. So the technical setup was like this in this experiment already many years ago. A framed rear projection on a canvas displays the painting. Behind this screen, an eye tracking is installed. So a camera is pointing at the viewer's eyes. A software analyzed the video signal and located the center of the iris and a reflection of infrared light source in the viewer's eyes. With this, it can calculate exactly on which part of the painting the viewer is looking at. So these coordinates are then used to distort the picture and exactly these spots. This means that as soon as the viewer looks at the particular part of the picture, this part is distorted. Some other small example as me seeing this algorithm, this machine that is telling to me, or you are sad. So I was playing with this game, how this algorithm interpret also or try to interpret our emotion based on a very detailed programmation by human thinking and human software programmation. So Lev Manovich in his book Cultures Analytics speak about that such of huge data recording and setting, it will increase its magnitude. So this data, this really deep analysis in coding and decoding become always more and more big. And so also because these data, not only physical data, but also virtual data are increasing. Quoting, say, in the future, records of human physiological states and the brain activity of hundreds of millions of people may also become widely available and widely used. Closing quote. So it's just a big portrait of humanity walking, sleeping, driving, bicycling, sitting, lifting, running, speaking, and manifested ourselves in this physiological organism that is also distributed in multiple systems and formats and file and server and location and organization. So our use is also to understand this connection between different disciplines. In my occasion is more the semiotic discipline joined with art and with anthropology, visual anthropology, especially involving question very specific and problematize also what we are used to call normal. So in a very short way, I just said you thank you very much. And I'm still here to come back to maybe a poem with if we have more time, or as you, Mattia, will tell me. Thank you very much.
Silvia, you actually have 2 to 3 more minutes, so you're early. So please, if there is anything else you want to show us, you have a couple of minutes to do so. So please go ahead.
We can read maybe the other poem if you like.
Of course, please do.
It's quite nice. So it's also to understand this way to approach use, and this is very nice. It's a collaborative poem, of course. It's 8 authors at least. So the result is here. The body, the wall, in relation, in space, we unfold, we explore and share, we coexist, and we divide, and yet it shelters us. My journey begins a balcony where there are only stones, blue stones that do not speak. They only dream when they see the horizon in perspective. My body is rising in flight. In my face, I see despair, for this is no peace of mind when the path is unknown. In front of me, there's only a door, a liminal space that transports me to a wide dimension. Where there is no limitation in the way I move, I see clouds, birds, planes, and I listen. Knock, 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 the clock is ticking. Knock, knock, the drops are falling. One cat starts to fly while the other cat's just watching me. Time stood still and the cat never exists, only traces of smoke in the wind coming out of some tacos. Very Mexican. The smoke coming out of the tacos generated a series of sounds of different tonalities and volumes. These were each of my senses alert to know when to flee. And if I can't run away, I will only be left to stand behind this mask, sprouting like the long branches of a lifted tree.